That evening, my future son-in-law was standing in my front hallway, staring at the wall just to the left of the door. Not at the photographs, not at the shadow box my late wife put together from our trip to Yellowstone, the one with the pressed wildflowers and the old ticket stubs. He was staring at the small oak cabinet beneath the coat hooks. The one nobody ever notices, the one I've kept locked since 1987, with the focused, measuring attention of a man who is not seeing a cabinet but calculating what might be inside it. My daughter was 3 feet away from him, scrolling through her phone. She looked up for just a second, and I saw something on her face I hadn't seen since she was 9 years old, and had broken her mother's ceramic cardinal trying to play catch in the living room. A specific kind of tension around the mouth, not guilt, something closer to fear. I cleared my throat coming through the door. He turned immediately. Big smile, firm handshake, the whole performance. "Frank, good to see you." "You too," I said, and I looked past him at the cabinet. It was a Sunday in October, about 5 months before the wedding. I told myself I was imagining things. I was good at telling myself that. His name was Derek Stahl, 34 years old, sales director for a private wealth management consulting firm out of Phoenix. He had met my daughter at a conference in Denver 2 years earlier, and from the beginning, he had known exactly what to say, exactly how much wine to know about, exactly how interested in woodworking to seem, when he found out I'd spent 32 years as a structural engineer. He was handsome in a careful way. He exercised. He dressed well without being showy about it. He laughed at the right moments and listened when older people spoke, which is rarer than it should be. My daughter's friends loved him. Her aunt called him a keeper at Thanksgiving, and he smiled with the right amount of modesty. "My name is Frank Deller. I'm 64 years old. I spent my career in structural engineering, not the glamorous kind, not glass towers and city skylines. I spent 32 years assessing load-bearing capacity, identifying structural failure points, reviewing what other people had built, and determining whether it would hold. I worked mostly on bridges, older commercial buildings, infrastructure projects for county and state governments across the Southwest. By the time I retired 3 years ago, I had reviewed more than 400 structures and recommended the demolition of 11 of them. In my field, they call that a perfect record because every one of those 11 would have eventually come down on its own, and none of mine came down with people inside. I say this not to boast. I say it because it matters to what happened later. I had a home in Scottsdale that I'd owned outright since 2009, a rental property in Tempe, a small commercial building I'd bought during the recession and converted to office suites, which had been reliably profitable ever since. And about 6 years ago, on something close to impulse, I had bought a 40-acre piece of land outside Sedona from the family of a colleague who had passed away. Red rock country, scrub oak, a dry creek bed that ran in the spring. It had appreciated significantly. I hadn't done much with it, except walk it twice a year and pay the property taxes. Everything was in my name. Everything had a precise value. And Derek knew, because my daughter had told him, because my daughter trusted him, because my daughter believed he was who he said he was. The wedding was set for March 22nd at the Botanical Garden in Scottsdale, followed by a reception at a resort in the McDowell Mountains. 130 guests, a band, a photographer my daughter had researched for 6 months. I had contributed $40,000, not to impress anyone, because my daughter deserved a good day. About 6 weeks before the wedding, Derek asked if we could have lunch, just the two of us. Father-in-law and son-in-law, he said. Male bonding before the big day. We met at a steakhouse near Camelback Road. Good lighting, leather booths, the kind of place where serious conversations happen on someone else's expense account. He ordered a scotch. He waited until the bread came. Then he leaned forward with his elbows on the table and looked at me with the particular expression of a man who has rehearsed what he's about to say. "Frank, I want to be straight with you because I think you deserve that. My daughter and I have been talking about the future, your future, specifically." I waited. "You've built something real. The house, the Tempe property, the Sedona land. That's a significant portfolio for one person to manage. And you're not getting any younger. I say that with respect. What happens when managing all of it becomes more than you want to deal with? Have you thought about simplifying?" He talked like a brochure. Calm, reasonable, slightly paternalistic. "I'm managing just fine," I said. Of course you are, of course. What I mean is, there are ways to structure things now that would protect you from a tax burden later. Protect her too. A family trust, for example. Or a direct transfer with retained life use. You keep living in the house, you keep the income from Tempe, but the title moves. It's clean, it's efficient, and it spares everyone a lot of difficulty down the road. Down the road, I said. Probate, Frank. Estate complications. We want to make sure everything is taken care of. I told him I'd think about it. I drove home and sat in my truck in the driveway for a while without going inside. He had used the word we. My daughter and I have been talking, as if this had been her idea, or at least her co-signature. I tried to bring it up with her 2 days later. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place, halfway between embarrassed and defensive. He's just being practical, Dad. He thinks about these things. It's what he does for work. He does this for other people's families, I said. Not his own. We're going to be family. What does a family trust get him exactly? She was quiet for a moment. He loves me, she said. That's what it gets him. There was something flat in her voice when she said it, like a line she'd decided to believe. I let it go. The wedding was 4 weeks out. It wasn't the moment. The rehearsal dinner was the Friday before the wedding, at a restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, the menu written on a chalkboard. Derek was at the center of everything, charming the room, pouring wine for the tables, making toasts with the confidence of a man who considers himself the protagonist of every room he enters. His parents were there, his mother from Tucson, his father from somewhere in Colorado he rarely mentioned. Quiet people, ordinary in a way that was hard to reconcile with their son. His father shook my hand with the sincere grip of a man who doesn't have an angle, and I felt something uncomfortable. Because whatever Derek was, it hadn't come from home. I watched my daughter that evening, really watched her. She was laughing, but her laughter arrived half a beat after everyone else's, like she was monitoring the room and calculating the right response. She barely touched her food. At one point, Derek leaned over and said something close to her ear, and I saw her fingers tighten on her wine glass. Not a flinch, but something in that direction. She smiled immediately after. A practiced smile. I didn't sleep that night. The morning of March 22nd was clear and warm. Phoenix in late March can still surprise you. The ceremony was outdoors, in the garden, beneath the canopy of blooming Palo Verde trees, the mountains visible in the distance. The officiant read the standard vows with the practiced warmth of someone who has said them 300 times. I watched Derek's face during the exchange. His eyes were dry and attentive. My daughter's hands, holding his, were trembling slightly, not from joy. I'd seen her hands when she was joyful. This was different. The reception was beautiful. I'll give it that. The band played well. The light over the mountains in the early evening was the color of old copper. And for a few hours I managed to be mostly present. I've spent 32 years learning to assess risk without letting it consume every room I walk into. Sometimes it works. It was during the father-daughter dance that everything changed. The band played a song my wife had loved, a Patsy Cline song my daughter had specifically requested, the same one we'd danced to at her high school graduation party when my wife was still alive, and none of us knew yet what we would all eventually lose. My daughter looked so much like her mother in that moment, in the ivory dress with her hair up, that I had to breathe through it. We danced. She had her head slightly down. You look beautiful, I said. Thanks, Dad. 2 steps, 3. She glanced toward the head table where Derek sat with his groomsmen. He was watching us, not with the softness of a new husband watching his wife dance with her father, with the fixed attention of someone monitoring a transaction. My daughter shifted her hand along my arm and in one motion, a motion that lasted maybe 2 seconds and was invisible to everyone else in the room, she pressed something into the breast pocket of my jacket. She kept dancing. Her face didn't change. It took me several seconds to understand what had just happened. I kept smiling for the room. I turned with her. At the end of the song, I walked her back to the head table, shook Derek's hand, told him he was a lucky man. Then I excused myself and walked to the men's room. In the stall, I took out what she'd put in my pocket, a folded piece of paper, torn from a small notepad, the kind you get at hotel check-in desks. Her handwriting, careful and small, like she'd been trying not to press too hard. Dad, he has a document he's going to ask you to sign during the honeymoon. He said it was a medical authorization in case of emergency while you're alone. but I saw what it actually says. It's a durable power of attorney, full scope, financial and legal. I found it on his laptop 3 weeks ago. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Please don't sign anything. Please. I read it 3 times. A durable power of attorney, fully executed and scoped, gives the holder the legal authority to make financial and legal decisions on behalf of the grantor. Sell property, liquidate accounts, enter into contracts. In Arizona, a durable power of attorney remains in effect even if the grantor becomes incapacitated. It doesn't expire unless you specifically build in an expiration. I folded the paper. I put it in my inside jacket pocket, not the breast pocket, the inside one, against my chest. I flushed the toilet even though I hadn't used it. I washed my hands. I looked at myself in the mirror for a moment. The structural engineer, still standing. I walked back into the reception. I ordered a club soda at the bar. I found Derek across the room in conversation with a man I didn't recognize, mid-40s, gray suit, the watchful posture of someone who wasn't there for the party. I filed him away. The next morning, my daughter and Derek flew to Maui for 2 weeks. I drove home in the quiet and sat at the kitchen table until the coffee got cold. Then I made a phone call. My attorney's name is Walt Gerber. He's been handling my affairs since I bought the Tempe property in 2011. A quiet man, methodical. The kind of lawyer who only tells you what he's certain of. I called him on Monday morning. Walt, I need to see you today if possible. That serious? That's serious. He cleared his afternoon. I drove to his office in North Scottsdale and showed him the note. He read it without expression, set it down, and looked at me. Do you know if this document has already been executed somewhere? No. I don't know anything yet. Has he had access to your identifying documents? SSN, Arizona ID, anything notarial? I thought about the oak cabinet in my hallway, the one Derek had been staring at in October. My daughter had a spare key to my house. She had stayed there twice in the past year while her apartment was being repainted. He may have had access to my home without me present, I said. Walt put down his pen. Frank, if someone executed a power of attorney using your documents without your consent or knowledge, that's forgery. That's fraud. But before we get there, we need to know if anything has been filed or recorded. Powers of attorney don't require recording unless they're used to transfer real property. That makes them harder to track, but not impossible. What do I do in the meantime? Today, you call your bank and freeze any ability to make changes to your accounts without your in-person presence. You call the title company that holds your Tempe property and your Scottsdale deed and put a flag on both. I'll draft a notarized statement today declaring that you have authorized no one to act on your behalf in any financial or legal capacity. If someone tries to use a document, they'll hit a wall immediately. I did all of that before 5 o'clock. Over the next 10 days, while my daughter was in Maui sending me pictures of sunsets and snorkeling excursions, I couldn't respond to the way I wanted to. I worked. I had a contact, a woman I'd worked with 20 years ago on a county infrastructure project, who had since moved into title insurance and property law. She knew people across the state. I explained the situation without overstating what I knew. She made calls. By the end of the first week, she had found it. A durable power of attorney document, notarized in Maricopa County, bearing my name and signature and dated February 9th, 6 weeks before the wedding. The document named Derek Stahl as my attorney, in fact, for a period of 5 years, covering all financial, legal, and real property decisions. I had never seen the document. The signature was mine. It was not mine. The notary seal was from a small office in Chandler. My contact had already made an inquiry. The notary, a young woman, recently licensed, had no recollection of the transaction. Her logbook for that date showed a different appointment. Someone had used her seal without her knowledge, or someone had paid her to forget. I sat with this for a full evening before I called Walt again. You have enough to file, he said. I know, but I want him to come to me first. I don't want him to know I know. A long pause on the line. You want to let him make his move. I want to be in the room when he does. The 2 weeks passed. My daughter and Derek came home on a Sunday evening. On Monday morning, Derek called. Frank, welcome back to civilization. That's what he said. Like I was the one who had been away. I wanted to set up some time this week. There are a few things I'd love to walk you through. Some planning documents Claire and I have been working on. Nothing complicated. Sure, I said. Let's say Thursday. Perfect. I know a great place. Come to my house, I said. I'll make coffee. A small hesitation. Yeah, of course. Thursday works great. On Wednesday morning, I called my daughter. I need you to come Thursday, I said. Derek's coming over to talk about some documents. He said it was just the two of you. I know what he said. I need you there. A long quiet. Dad, do you know something? I know enough. Come, please. She came. They arrived together. I had coffee made and 3 cups on the table, which seemed to surprise him in a way he covered quickly. We sat. He produced a manila folder with the unhurried confidence of a man who believed he was still several steps ahead. Frank, I appreciate you letting me come to you. Like I said, Claire and I have been thinking about how to make sure your situation is structured in a way that's clean and efficient going forward. He set 2 documents on the table. I recognized the format of one of them. The first is a simple power of attorney, just to cover the basics while you're... Derek, I said. He looked up. You have nice handwriting. He blinked. Sorry? Nothing. I picked up the power of attorney document. I looked at it for a long time without reading it. Then I set it down. Let me ask you something. You know what I did for a living? Structural engineering? Sure. Do you know what I specifically spent 32 years doing? He waited. I assessed failure. That's the whole job. You look at what's been built, and you figure out where it's going to break before it actually breaks. The cracks that matter aren't always the ones you can see, most of the time. The dangerous ones are the ones that are hidden, stress fractures, hairline faults, things that look solid from the outside but are moving inside. His face was going very still. On February 9th of this year, I said, a durable power of attorney was executed in Maricopa County in my name. Full scope, 5 years, naming you as my attorney in fact. I did not sign it. I have never seen it. My attorney has the original. The notary has been interviewed, and we filed a complaint with the Arizona Attorney General's Fraud Division last Friday. My daughter made a sound I won't describe. Derek did not make any sound at all. That was the part that stayed with me. Claire also found something you'd prepared on your laptop 3 weeks before the wedding, I said. She told me the night of the wedding. She had the courage to do that under very difficult circumstances. I looked at my daughter. She protected me when she could have looked away, and I don't take that lightly. Derek's hands were flat on the table. I recognized the posture. It's the posture of a man who is calculating, not confessing. You don't have enough to. I have the document. I have the notary's statement. I have phone records showing 14 contacts between you and the attorney who prepared the paperwork over the last 4 months. I have a statement from a woman in Tucson whose father experienced something functionally identical 3 years ago when he was also in the early stages of a relationship with someone connected to your former firm. I paused. I have a lot, Derek. Not all of it was as solid as I made it sound. The phone records had come through an informal channel and wouldn't survive a formal challenge on their own. The Tucson's statement was preliminary and didn't name Derek directly. But a man who has built a fraudulent document knows exactly how much exposure he carries, and his instinct will be to assume the worst. I was counting on that. My daughter had been sitting very still. Now she spoke. Did you use my key? She said. Her voice was quiet and steady. Did you go to my father's house and take his documents? He didn't answer. Derek, I was trying to protect your future, he said. I need you to answer my question. The silence had a different quality from the others. He looked at the table, then at me. What do you want? He said. I don't want anything from you, I said. The complaint is filed. It proceeds independently of whatever you and my daughter decide to do. That's out of my hands now, which is true. This part was true. We had filed. What you do next is between you and your attorney. What my daughter does next is her decision. I stood up. I picked up my coffee cup. You can see yourselves out, I said. The folder stays on the table. I walked to the back porch and stayed there until I heard the front door. It was another 20 minutes before my daughter came out. She sat down in the other chair. She hadn't put on her jacket and it was still cool in the mornings, so I went inside and got her a blanket, the old fleece one that had been on the back of that chair since before she was born. He's gone, she said. I figured. He actually left. He just got in his car. Okay. We sat there for a while. The desert was doing what it does in late March, blooming unexpectedly, the way it only does when you've been through the dry months, and suddenly there's color everywhere. I found it on his laptop, she said. I wasn't snooping. He asked me to print something for him and I opened the wrong file. It was a cover letter. Addressed to you. She stopped. It said regarding the management of your assets going forward. I read the attachment. I read the whole thing. When was this? 3 weeks before the wedding. I confronted him and he said it was a draft. He said he was trying to help, that he should have talked to you first, that he was going to explain everything. He seemed so reasonable about it. He made me feel like I was overreacting. You weren't overreacting. I know. But I wanted to believe him, Dad. I wanted so badly for it to be explainable. She looked at her hands. I'm sorry I didn't come to you right away. You came to me at the right moment, I said. The night of the wedding. That took nerve. I was terrified he'd see. He didn't. She was quiet. What happens now? Legally? The AG's office will investigate the notary fraud. There's also potential exposure for whoever prepared the document. If it turns out to be a licensed attorney, that's a disbarment case, not just a civil matter. Derek will likely face charges. I set down the mug. As for the marriage, you should talk to a family attorney about your options. Arizona allows annulment under fraud if the fraud goes to the fundamental basis of the agreement. It's not always easy to prove, but the circumstances here are. They're documented. She nodded slowly. I'm going to be okay, she said. It sounded like a question. Yes, I said, you are. The investigation moved forward over the following months. The Chandler notary was found to have processed 2 other irregular transactions in the same quarter, both connected to a paralegal at a small firm in Scottsdale who had a prior association with Derek's former employer. The network was limited, not a large operation, but not improvised. Derek had done this before, or something close to it, with less documentation and less pushback. He was charged with fraud, forgery, and attempted financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, a charge that carries enhanced penalties in Arizona because of my age. His attorney negotiated a plea, 13 months probation, restitution of legal costs, and a permanent prohibition on holding any fiduciary license or power of attorney in the state. The paralegal lost his license. My daughter's annulment was granted 8 months after the wedding. The court found the marriage had been entered into under fraudulent misrepresentation of material facts. She moved back to Scottsdale. She's doing fine. She's careful now. More careful than she was, but not broken. There's a difference. About a month after the plea was entered, I drove out to the Sedona property. I hadn't been there in almost a year. It was a cool morning, early November, the cottonwoods already yellow along the creek bed, the red rock catching the low light the way it does in the fall when the angle is right. I walked the fence line the way I used to with my daughter when she was small and my wife was still alive, and we would camp out there on summer weekends with a second-hand tent and a camp stove and nothing else we needed. I thought about Derek standing in my hallway in October, staring at that cabinet. I thought about all the preparation that had gone into it, the documents, the contacts, the fake notarization, the timeline, the amount of energy a person has to invest to build something false. I had assessed the structure. I had found the fracture. I have a bad knee from a construction site accident in 2004, and a left shoulder that complains in the cold, and a cat named Nothing, I just call him the cat, who expects breakfast at 6 regardless of what I have going on. None of that makes me easy to outmaneuver. 32 years of finding what other people missed taught me that the most dangerous assumption anyone can make about a load-bearing wall is that because it's been standing for a long time, it's safe to ignore. My son-in-law had assumed I was old enough to stop paying attention. He hadn't thought about what a structural engineer does when he notices a crack.